Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Dr. Nkem Ezamama, and I want to tell you something about the true power of storytelling, because whether you realize it or not, our lives are really built on stories. And so, like, when you introduce yourself to someone, right, you don't just list facts, right? You tell them a story about who you are, where you've been, what you've experienced, what has shaped you. That's all in the power of storytelling. And stories are how human beings make meaning of our lives, right? So even before books existed, right? Even before the internet, before AI, we told stories. And it's those stories that we pass down, wisdom, values, your vision, your mission, the lessons that you've lived. It's all through stories. And those stories, right, is kind of what move people. Facts will inform people, but really when you tell a moving story, right, people change. And so over the next 40 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how storytelling took me from an invisible emergency medicine physician to raising and actually owning and acquiring 153 million in real estate assets with over 120 investors finding me on LinkedIn. And I want to teach you that exact framework so that you can do the same thing. If you're excited, it's going to get good. Okay, perfect. So I want to start with a specific moment, right? It was June 2024. I was about to close on a significant real estate deal, right? It required $50,000 of my own capital, and I was scared, to say the least. People, and I posted something on LinkedIn, right? People would wait after maybe the deal succeeded to say something, maybe share the highlight reel, something like, okay, just close another deal, something maybe generic, something forgettable. But instead, what I did that day was I posted how I had put this money in on the line, and I'd done my research, I'd done my work. I believed in the numbers, I believed in the team, but I was scared. This was my hard-earned money that I was giving. And I shared that story, right? What I didn't expect happened was that post, that one single LinkedIn post, right, it generated over 24,000 impressions. And with that, over 250 people either liked, commented, or reached out to me, right? And these were professionals who were sharing their own fear stories of the things that they had done. And from that came 18 direct messages from potential investors. It was not people who were impressed by my success, right? These were people who trusted me because I was honest, because I was vulnerable. And that single post generated more business over, like, I think maybe the next 6 months than maybe one like really pretty professional polished content would have done for me. And you might be asking why, right? It's because I told a story. I told a real one that had fear, one that had high stakes in it, but there was a lot of humanity in it, and that mattered. And so that's what we're going to learn today. But first, right, I want to show you why LinkedIn is where this really matters. Like, you might be wondering, why are we talking about LinkedIn, especially as it ties with storytelling? And I want to share that with you. So I told you I'd share with you some frameworks, but I need you to understand something about where we are right now, right? 2026, March. LinkedIn has about 1.2 billion professionals on it, right? And 65 million of them are decision makers. 10 million of them are C-suite executives. And so this stat, right, these stats that I just gave you, they should change how you think about the platform, right? So that's 82% of decision makers, the makers that say that, creator content on LinkedIn influences their purchasing decisions. That's so important. It's 82%, right? Hear me say that to you. And yes, so whether it's, like, as you're thinking, like, how could I use this? And then tie in storytelling with it, right? Whether it's investing in a deal, whether it's hiring for your firm, whether it's booking clients for your services, whether it's, creating a mentorship program and getting mentees, whether it's even pushing, kind of your brand or building your brand inside what you're already doing, right? Whether it's looking for partners with you. People are influenced by what they see on LinkedIn. And so it's important how you're showing up. And this is like another side to that coin, right? 90% of C-level decision makers, these are makers that will not respond to cold outreach, but when they hear your story, they see you on LinkedIn, right? They might respond, right? Out of that 90 something percent, right? They might ignore cold call, cold DMs, cold emails, but they'll engage with someone on LinkedIn who has an established professional brand, who is putting out content and who's sharing value. someone whose story they've been following, right? Because they started with the story and they followed and they got excited. But that is someone that they already trust, right? They follow you, they listen to you. So that's not, just me saying it, right? That's LinkedIn has done research and it's showing that. So the people who can change your career, like your business, your income, they're already on this platform, right? They're decision makers, and they base that on what they see, what they follow, the content that they engage in, that they value. So the question isn't whether or not they're there, because like it's obvious they're there. The question is whether they're seeing you, right? And if they're not seeing you, it's because you're not qualified. And it's not because you're not qualified, right? It's just because they don't know you yet. So the question is, are you telling your story? Are you showing up, right? And so I want to share with you, right? You might be asking, okay, fine, you're telling me all these stats about LinkedIn. I want to show you who I was before I started continuously posting on LinkedIn and really growing on the platform. 3+ years ago, about to be 4, right? I was just a practicing EM physician and I was earning, somewhere around $300,000 a year. And I was already, at that point, I had already started building a real estate portfolio, and I had all the knowledge that I needed that could help, thousands of professionals. I was already building Phoenix Capital, but I was completely invisible, right? Nobody outside like my immediate circle knew that I existed, but I knew I had something of value, and I knew I had something that I wanted to share that would make a difference, right? And here's the thing. I was trying, right? In the beginning, I was posting on LinkedIn. I would maybe post like quotes. I'd post inspirational messages, some tips, some advice, some educational content, and the kind that I thought that people wanted to hear, but nothing was happening, right? I just get crickets, maybe 1 or 2 people, maybe my sister would engage because she felt bad. But the potential investors, right, who have been perfect, who would have been perfect for my deals, they were finding other people, right? Because I just wasn't showing up the right way. So when I decided I wanted to start speaking, right, I noticed speaking opportunities were going to other professionals, but it's because they were visible. And so it took me 18 months, right, to figure out what I was doing wrong. And the answer wasn't, Nkem, you need to post more, right? It wasn't be more consistent, because I was, and it wasn't using better hashtags, right? I learned very quickly that I needed to tell better stories, right? I needed to speak to the people who wanted to hear what I had to say. And so once I learned how to tell those stories strategically, and I'll tell you how, right, it changed, right? Phoenix Capital started growing. The investors who were always there, right? They were always there. They didn't just show up. They were always there, but then they started seeing me. They started resonating with my story. I started, showing up with vulnerability, and it worked, right? And all of it traced back to one shift. And that's what I want to share with you today. And so before I go any further, right, I want to do something, and it's going to take 30 seconds, but I'm hoping that people on the call will engage. But I want you to think about an opportunity that passed you by maybe in the last year, right? Maybe passed you by because the right person did not know that you existed. Maybe a client who went with someone else, or at work, they picked someone else for a promotion, or a partnership that didn't happen, or a stage that maybe you weren't invited to, or whatever it is, right? A mentee that went to another mentor, or just someone who didn't align with you, right? So think about any of those things that didn't go right. I want you to just kind of drop it in the chat, right? So drop 1-word description for how you felt, or like how that makes you feel, or like even say what that thing was. Like, so if it was a client, maybe you could just say a client. Or if it was speaking, you could just say speaking, or whatever it is. But if there was some time in the last year that an opportunity passed you by, or a client or something, because they didn't know you existed, would you put it in chat? A connection. Thank you. I love that. So that was a connection that was missed because you weren't showing up, right? And if someone else has something that maybe missed them this past year, a gig, okay, so that's good. That's something. So I would say, as people start thinking and tossing it in the chats, right, every single one of those problems, so the connection, the gig, whether it was an investment, right, every single one of them, I think, was a storytelling problem. It wasn't an expertise. It wasn't, you didn't miss that connection because you weren't an expert. you didn't miss that gig because, you know, you were not qualified, right? It was maybe because one, they didn't know you, and they didn't know you, they didn't resonate with you, they didn't trust you, and maybe it was a storytelling problem, right? Because the people who got those opportunities, they weren't necessarily better than you, right? They were just more visible. People saw them, people knew them, they told their story. We all have a story to tell. And by the end of today, right, you know exactly how to do the same. So I'm really excited. But I talked to you about a framework. I want to share that framework with you real quickly. So this is a false belief that I want to break, right? And so in breaking this false belief, I want to tell you 3 secrets. A lot of professionals, as they think about getting on LinkedIn, they think like, if I attract the right investors, clients, or partners, right? In order for me to do that, like if I really want to try to get those people, I need to sound perfect, right? I need to sound put together. I need to show them every time that I'm winning, I'm crushing at this thing called life, right? And that belief, right, is what's keeping you invincible. And so it's what's keeping you invisible. Because here is actually what builds trust. And that is secret number 1. It is a combination of being vulnerable and being competent, right? That magic, you know, together, that combination together, plus the magic of storytelling, of telling your story, is what makes it, you know, undeniable. I refer to that $50,000 post, and I'm actually going to show you that exact post. Think about that post, right? Why did 18 potential investors reach out to me? It's not because I sounded impressive, like I gave away money, right? But it's because I shared a real fear and I walked them through what I was thinking, right? What made me get to that decision with a little bit more ease. I'll tell you this, that fear, it actually made me human, right? The work behind it made me credible. And so together, the human nature plus the credibility, what did it do? It built trust. And so people were like, well, if you did this, right, and this is the result you got, tell me more. Is there another opportunity like that I could jump into? That's the formula. And I want to show you exactly how it works. And so I said I would show you the framework in a real post. And this is my actual post. So I pulled it up already. So I think it's going to be on the screen. Okay, great. So can everybody see it? Yep, everybody can see it on the screen. So it's a little small, but kind of manage with me. But that's the actual post, right? This is the moment. I talked about it. That moment was specific, right? $50,000 wire transfer. I did that. So when you're creating that framework, right? And I'm going to just go back to the framework real quickly, right? It's moment, fear, decision, and insight. Those are kind of the 4 things in that framework of storytelling. So I'll quickly go back to my post. And so this is kind of the moment was the specific time, $50,000 wire transfer. And then when I think about the fear, right? The fear was, I'm terrified. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't say I'm a little nervous. I said, hey, this frightens me, right? And the more honest you name that fear, right, the more your audience thinks, well, I think I feel the same way too. And so like and then the decision part, right? I said it, I was like, this is my first real estate deal. This is the reason why I'm doing it. I put that in the post. And then at the closing part of it, right, towards the end, at the closing part of it, right, that's kind of where the insight is, where fear is not a signal to stop, right? It's a signal that the stakes are high enough to matter, and I want to share that, you know. And so this post, right, it got me, and down here, you can see it got me 24,000 impressions with 18 investors who kind of went into my DM and said, hey, tell me more. I didn't have, when I put this post out, I didn't have a lot of followers. I didn't have 500,000 followers, right? I just had 5,000. That's kind of where I was. But it was the right people who I was speaking to. So I want that to land for a second, right? It's 4 steps when you think about writing a story, right? It's the moment, the fear, decision, and then the insight behind it, right? And that's the framework. And when you structure a story this way, like you hit both triggers, right? The vulnerability, you hit that through the fear, and then the competence is going to be through the decision and the insight that came with that, the thing that you did, right? That combination truly builds trust. And it builds trust faster than anything else that we can think about, right? And I want to show you the data to prove that. So I've tracked in the last 18 months, right? I've tracked every post that I've published. And when I post a story using this framework that I just showed you, right, I average somewhere around 12,000 impressions. Think about that. The impressions are like you're sitting, or you're like maybe in a soccer field, right? Everyone's staring at you in the middle of the field. There's 12,000 eyes are on what you're doing, what you're talking about, what you're sharing. But that's the average when you tell stories. And from that usually comes maybe 3 to 5 qualified DMs per post like that, right? And it's a lot of people who are engaging back and forth and having good discussion because you're giving them value. So those people are investors, clients, partners, people who want to get you on a podcast if that's what you're interested in, people who want to get you on stage, right? They're reaching out and they want to connect with you, again, because you're telling stories. Now, when I post, kind of generic educational content, when I talk about tips, advice, like 5 things you should know, it doesn't do that well, right? Maybe I'll get 1,000 impressions. Maybe I'll do well, I'll do decent engagement, right? But it doesn't really convert. Stories outperform by 2 to 3 times every single time. So why don't we tell stories, right? And this is, I'll tell you, this is what matters the most, right? Those story-driven DMs, again, they're going to convert at a higher rate because by the time someone reaches out after reading your story, right? They don't read 1, they don't read 2, they kind of I don't want to say doom scroll, but they just kind of go into this, this pipeline of everything that you've been talking about. And by the time they come to you, right, they almost trust you. That conversation is fundamentally different, right? And that's how I've been able to raise millions, on LinkedIn, just through the people who have found me, not through pitching, just really through storytelling, because that builds trust like over weeks and months, right? That's because they've been seeing that through my posting, and I've been consistent with posting for the last 3 years. Okay, so I want to also teach you something a little tactical right now, right? Something that you can use tonight if you're like, okay, I have the framework to write the story, to write the post, right? That moment, fear, decision, insight framework that we just talked about, right? That's the body of the story. But none of it matters if like they don't click see more, right? You know how on your LinkedIn feed, right? For every post, you just see like the first 2 lines. That's the hook, right? And then it's that hook that people want to click see more, so then they can read the whole thing. Again, I'll show you those first 2 lines, but if people keep scrolling, right? If they don't stop, then they'll never get the full story. They never get to read that story. And the framework that you've built doesn't get to be seen. And that trust does not get to be built, right? And so the hook is, I would say, where 90% of people fail in storytelling. They start with something generic, right? I want to share some thoughts about leadership. Okay, everybody has had thoughts about leadership, right? Nobody's stopping to read that. But I would say, when you start thinking, and you might want to write this down or take a screenshot of the screen, but these are 3 hook formulas that work every single time. And I'm going to give you an example of 2 of them. I looked at 2 of my posts and I said, I think these 2 will be really good. So I'm going to share that with you. And the first one is confession, right? So in that confession hook, you start with something that's unexpected or something that's vulnerable, right? It could be one of my posts was like, I almost turned down a speaking invitation from the United Nations. Here's why, right? That was a hook, and it was true. But like people read that, and the first thing they think is, are you insane? And so they want to hear the full story, right? They have to click because they want to know why. And then that's when you tell them the full story. The second one is the moment, right? So that moment, so drop them into a specific scene, right? June 2024, I was sitting at night after working. I was staring at the wire transfer instructions and I pressed click, right? That is like, okay, what did you do? What did you send? Where did that money come from? All the things. People want to read more. And then the other one that works really well is contradiction, right? So you challenge what everyone assumes. So I did a post and I said, everyone says you need 100,000 followers to attract investors. Well, I had 5,000, and here's how I raised my first $1 million. Somebody who has less than that, right, is going to be like, well, how did she do it? I want to learn. They're curious, and so they click more. So I want to show you examples and hooks from my post. Now you're going to see the whole post because it's mine. So, but if you are looking on your side, like on your feed, you would only see 2 of them. But because we're using mine, you'll see the whole post. But this was one of them, right? This was the first hook. And it was, I did the math on my medical career and the numbers broke my heart, right? That was my hook. So you're going to see more of the post, right? Because it's my actual LinkedIn. But if not, you would have just seen that, right? So this one falls into that moment formula. So I'm dropping us into like the specific scene, which was me doing the math and having this emotional reaction to it, right? The numbers broke my heart. That's the gap. And people might want to, everyone's going to want to click to see like what those numbers are. You can see them on the screen. And then this one is especially strong because like it combines specificity, which was I did the math, with that unexpected emotion, which is it broke my heart. You know, any physician maybe reading this, they're going to be like, wait, what did she find? Should I be doing the math too? How's that going to change, right? And so that's that one. And so that is the hook that you'll see. And then the formula for the story is next. And then this is another hook, right? I wrote, and this was after one of my LinkedIn presentations that I did. And I wrote, I'm an introvert, I hate self-promotion, and I'm not naturally good at marketing, right? So this one is a confession formula. And here I'm admitting to something that seems to contradict who I am as someone who's visible, who has a really visible presence on LinkedIn, right? And then the gap is like, if I hate all of this, right, then how did I build what I built, right? And so people are like, wait, tell me more, right? And it works really well because my audience relates to, you know, every one of these statements, right? They're not in thinking, these people are, a lot of my LinkedIn followers are lurkers, right? So they're not posting and they're not talking and they're not commenting, right? And they don't like self-promotion. So they're like, well, if she did this, how did I? So they're nodding, they're thinking, you know, well, oh, that's me too. And then they have to see what comes next, right? So they click, right? And so these are 2 examples of like, again, what a hook should look like, right? This is what I want you to notice, right? Every single one of that hook, right? It creates a gap. And there's something that's unresolved if you just read those 2 lines, right? It's a question that needs answering, a contradiction that needs explaining, a confession that needs some sort of context to it, right? That gap, that unfinished thought is what's going to make people click, see more. I want more. I want to hear more. And once they click it, right, then that's when you now have that moment, fear, decision, insight that claims the whole story. And that's what's going to carry them through it all. So now you have the hook formulas and you have the story, right? That's a complete post structure that you can use this week. So if you're thinking about testing out LinkedIn, right, go just use this and see what comes out of it. But these are clear examples of how it works. A lot of people are afraid to post. They're like, well, I don't know what to do. Tell a story. Create a hook, create a hook that, has to do with a little bit of like a contradiction or a moment or a confession, and write a story behind it. And I guarantee you it's going to work. If you do it, please feel free to tag me maybe in the post or in the comments and be like, I did this, and test that out because I think it's important. So secret number 1, right? You don't have to be polished. I showed you an example. You just need to be more honest and more strategic at the same time. So use that framework. I'll repeat it again. The moment, the fear behind it, the decision, and what you learn from it. And when you do that, right, it just gives you exactly what you need. So in the LinkedIn course that I created, we have a bunch of these story templates that are built from this framework, right? All you need to do is have your own specific details and post. So sometimes you get nervous about posting because you're like, oh, I don't know what to talk about, right? Tell stories, use this framework, plus all the templates that's given to you, and it's gonna work out. Now, the templates won't help you if you have the second false belief. And I told you we're gonna break down 3 false beliefs today, but this is the second one. The second one, secret number 2, is about the belief that stops a lot of capable people more than any other thing. It's like, I'm not interesting enough, right? I don't have a story to tell. And I want to be direct with you. In 2026, March, right? AI can write beautiful LinkedIn posts, right? They can write posts that you might pause and be like, you have ChatGPT, we have Claude now, we have Gemini, we have dozens of tools, right? And so the barrier to creating amazing content is like, it's pretty much 0. So then what happens, right? we see it very often now. The internet is flooded with a lot of like generic, beautiful AI generated content with a lot of M dashes and a lot of delve and furthermore, and they all sound the same, right? But in that landscape, which is where we are, there's no taking back time, right? What stands out? I would say the thing that stands out the most is your specific story. So again, I go back to that post, the fear that I felt when I risked 50,000, the imposter syndrome when maybe you got this big opportunity, or the exact lesson from a failure that nobody else has experienced but you, right? You can write about that. You can talk about that. AI, they can't replicate that because they don't know your story. Only you can tell your story. So you're not boring. You have great stories to tell. You just have to start telling them. And remember what I told you about LinkedIn, right? 82% of decision makers, they say that creator content influences making that decision, whether it's purchasing, whether it's investing, whether it's following you. They decided based on that content. So they're not influenced by like AI stuff, right? They're influenced by real human stories. And I want to prove it to you. So this, I have an exercise, and thank you for everyone. You're welcome. And thank you for everyone who is participating. But I want you, we have maybe one more exercise after this. But so this is what we're going to do right now, right? I want 2 minutes of your time. I want you to think about a moment in the last maybe 6 months when you made a hard decision, right? Or you felt afraid, but you acted anyways. You learned something the hard way, or you were surprised by an outcome. So think about that, right? Maybe in the last 6 months, you really had a hard decision to make. You were scared about something, but you did it anyway. You felt the fear and you did it, or you learned something the hard way, or you did something and you were surprised that the outcome was this way, right? I want you, if you can, to fill in the blanks and drop it in the chat, right? So maybe something like, I was afraid that this happened when I did this. So I will maybe toss it in the chat real quickly. And if anybody wants to, I'll put it in the chat right now. Okay, good. So I just wrote that, right? So if you, I'll give everybody a second, right? If there's something that you've experienced, I would love for you to write it in the chat. And then maybe I'll like pick 1 or 2 responses as people are thinking. But if there's, again, like something that you were maybe afraid of and you did it anyways, and something you learned the hard way, or something that you did and you were surprised by the outcome. So if you, I see people typing, so I'll give people a second or 2 to respond. And for me, right, I'm going to give you an example while you're thinking, but again, right, that, again, that $50,000 post, right, I was afraid that I'd lose my money when I invested in my first real estate investment opportunity. So, and that's one where I did something, right, but I did something and I got a result that I didn't expect. Okay, I'll wait for another second, and maybe I'll maybe use my example, use another example. But that, when you think about the example I just gave, right, that moment and then the fear, right, both of them put together, right? So that's the moment, like the moment I did the thing, and then the fear that came with it, right? I was afraid that I would lose. We got one in the comment. I was afraid I wouldn't get another client when I turned one down because they didn't align with my goals or budget. I love that. So that was the moment. And then your fear, right? Now imagine adding a decision to that, right? And the decision was that, and Famimi was great. She already added a decision, but they didn't align with my goals, right? And so I turned them down. That, imagine, right? Imagine if you use that, you can build something from that, right? So that kind of LinkedIn post is even just that, it builds trust. And you wrote that in like under 30 seconds, right? I got another one. I was afraid that I won't have much turn up during a trade fair, but I ended up being the best I had in a while. See, that was a fear. And then you still did it, right? You made the decision, you did it, and then what came out of it? So each one of you, I would say, in just these 2 examples that we have, and thanks for participating, you just identified a story more than, like an AI generated tip would give you. Like one of those posts, you wouldn't get as much as what you just got from it. And it took you 30 seconds to do that. So the problem isn't that you don't have stories, right? Our everyday activities, our everyday experiences are some of the best stories. you have dozens of them, right? The problem is that you just don't have a system that is going to turn that into strategic content. I just kind of helped you think through it, get it out, and now you can use that as a hook, and then from there you can build a story around it. That's a cool part of what we're doing. The more you do it, the more you'll start thinking about it. But again, right, that's exactly what happened in that 2 minutes. You know, as you were thinking, maybe you didn't put it in the chat, but those who did, right, they identified a story that's more powerful than anything that AI could generate. Now, AI can write your post, and it can suggest ideas, which is fine, and it can polish your grammar, which is also good, but it cannot tell your journey, right? It can't tell my journey from like burned out ER physician to like now building the life I want and helping others to do the same, right? It can't tell that story. Now I can write it and it can fix it up for me and make it look pretty, but it can't share the lessons from my specific failures. So the things that haven't gone well, right? It's not going to be able to build trust that comes from like our real vulnerability. That no one else can create that for us except us. So you are both the author and the main character of your life. And the stories that you share, they don't just define you, right? They connect us together. They connect me to you as you share the story and I take it in. And so in a world that's filled with a lot of generic content, your authentic story is like, the best way I can describe it is like premium currency. And so as we think about it, right, I have, with a ton of hard work, right, I've created part of the LinkedIn Unlocked course and system is like a complete storytelling framework. It's going to help you kind of think through your journey, be able to craft it, create templates that, that share vulnerability, but do it strategically. You know, you want to share your story and you want to tell people, you want people to connect with you. But at the end of the day, that connection leads to value, and that value leads to gain for the both of you. So that's how you have to think about turning that experience into content that is going to build trust. But this is the last belief that is stopping you. So I want to break that for you. And so before I talk about that, right, secret number 2 is interesting. Like it says, you're very interesting. You've been through things that no one else has been through. That's what makes you unique. You've learned lessons nobody can teach you. So the problem is not your story. The problem is that maybe you haven't had a system to tell it. And so that's where we bring in secret number 3, which is the final false belief. And this is the one I think that keeps a lot of people stuck. Again, it's in line with the storytelling, and it's that I'm not natural at this. Like, I'm not creative. There's some people, those people who are like really good in telling stories. They're really good in how they show up online. But again, right, I want to tell you, I'm not a natural storyteller. I'm an ER doctor and I love it, right? And I'm a real estate investor and I love that as well, but I think in symptoms and I think in diagnosis and protocols. That's what I know, right? But what I discovered in LinkedIn is that it's not about creative talent. It's just, again, have a system, right? A repeatable framework that you follow most times. I don't want to say every time, because sometimes you might just like do something different and that might work. But for the most part, right, you have a system in how you think and how you post, and that produces results. And so in this, right, I created 5 types of stories, and I use that on rotation. I actually want you to go and maybe look at my post and see if you can figure out which one is which. But I do that, and the same 5 types, it's on rotation maybe 3 times a week, and then we do something different, right? But I do that over and over again. And so I want to show you what they are, so you don't have to feel like, okay, I'm just a natural storyteller. But the first one is transformation. We kind of talked about that a little bit, but your journey from like before to after, who you were before, and then you did the thing, and then you became someone else, right? So I did a post that went from like, that read something like, from invisible physician to $153 million in assets under management, right? That post, what it did is it built inspiration, and it attracted people who want what I have, right? They're like, how did she do that? I feel stuck. I feel burnt out. I want to build wealth. I want to do something else. How did she do it? Tell me your story, right? So maybe I can learn from it. Maybe I can take 1 or 2 things that I can glean from it and build mine. And so that's the transformation story. The next one is behind the scenes. So show the work, show what you've done. You've done hard work, right? Don't only show the highlight reel. And so when I post screenshots of like deal analysis, like they do decently well because people see what I'm doing. It's not just talking all the time. It's like, okay, I did this, I went here, right? We went to do due diligence, we talked to the contractors and the property management team, like all of that, I share that, right? And so that post, right, people want to see behind the scenes. They want to see, not everyone wants to see like an overnight success story because they can't relate to that. But when you show them what you're doing, right, they're able to see it. The third type of post is a challenge. So, you can disagree with something, like a contrarian post. That's another way to describe it. But disagree with something that maybe the industry takes for granted, right? So I did a post that I challenged the idea of physicians maybe are quietly quitting to do something else. And that post, I got so much heat from that post, right? But it generated a ton of conversation, and people were, reaching out to me because a lot of people kind of felt, a lot of healthcare professionals, physicians felt that, right? And so we connected on that and had conversation around that. And some of that led to investing. So that's something you can do, and do it well, do it tactfully. You don't want to pick fights on the internet because there's some people who really want to fight, and that's not you. So the lessons learned, you can talk about a specific failure or a surprise that taught you something really valuable. What this does is, like, everybody fails, but you don't hold on to that. It builds credibility because you're real, you're not perfect, right? We all make mistakes. How do we learn from that? How do we pivot from that? What do we do next? And people want to see that. So they want to see lessons learned. And then fear and action, right? Like, again, that $50,000 post, it was something that scared me, and then I did it anyways. So it was a vulnerability and then competence that, the learning that came along with it, what I learned, how I vetted the team, the operators, and then made that decision. That, vulnerability plus competence in its purest form is when you do a post on fear and action. So those are the 5 types of posts, 3 times a week. And that's the system. You don't need to be creative. You just need to follow that system. And I don't want to just list the 5 types. I want to show you how to build it from scratch, right? So we're going to use the transformation type because I think it's the most powerful for attracting a lot of opportunities. And it's the type that attracted a lot of my investors. So the skeleton, which is kind of what we've talked about, right? Lines 1 and 2 is the hook. Use the formula that we just talked about, right? And then let's use the moment one, right? 3 years ago, I was an ER physician working 60-hour week. Today, I manage 153 million in assets under management in real estate, right? That was one decision that changed everything. And so that is the hook, the moment. And then it's very specific. There's an unexpected contrast. 3 years ago working, and now I'm doing this, right? That gap, like, what happened? How did you go from that to that? That needs filling. And so that's an example of a type of post, right? And so the lines, the next like 3 to 5 lines is where I was. So the before, right? You have to be specific. You have to be honest. You don't just say like, I was unhappy. Everybody's unhappy. But like, I was earning $300,000. I was exhausted. Every dollar required me to show up physically, right? I didn't have any leverage. I didn't have any options. Paint that picture. Because I promise you, right, when you tell your story, right, this lines 3 to 5, right, that's, being specific of where you were, the before, right, a lot of people they have that same pain point. That's also part of their journey. And they're like, okay, well, how did you do it, right? And so the next, like, maybe 3 lines is what changed. So the turning point. One clear moment. And it's not like a gradual shift. Like it was like, okay, this happened, right? For me, a mentor told me something that really hit me, like just like a huge truck, right? I didn't have an expertise problem. I had a visibility problem. Nobody saw me. Nobody knew me. So how would they trust me, right? That was what changed. And then the next few lines is where you are right now. So the after, right? And for me, the after is now today, right? 153 million in assets under management, 120 investors. That is number specific proof. That's kind of what it looks like. And then the last few lines is what you've learned, so that this is the insight where the reader can apply to their own life, right? Okay, so you told your story. You told how you transformed. Now, how can you help me, right? So that gap between where you are and where you want to be is almost never about expertise, but it's about showing them. It's about being visible. It's about telling your story. And the right people, they need to know that you exist, right? And so the reader is going to think, well, this applies to me too, right? This is my story. I have a before, I have an after. I know the in between. How, like, how can I use this? How can I learn from this? And I would say your last line should like spark conversation. You want people to start having conversation, in the like you want people to start having conversations, and you want them to respond to you. So you could ask them a question like, what's one thing that you're great at that nobody knows about yet? Right? Give them an opportunity to converse with you and build engagement. But when you start doing that, right, the commenting section, it boosts the algorithm, right? And the algorithm shows your post to more people. This formula is how I got 20,000, 30,000 people, all eyes on my one post, right? And for me, it meant more people, more opportunities. But that is like a transformation post that I wanted you to see. And so all the way from the hook to the close, and you could write this tonight. And this is what I want you to see, right? This is not creative writing. Like it wasn't perfect. It's just a structure, and you fill in the specific details. I can't fill that in. You can. So like your before, your turning point, your after, your insight, the thing you learned that you want to share with others. And the structure does a lot of the heavy lifting. And that's what I'm giving you here tonight, right? And so as you think about, okay, how do I want to grow on LinkedIn, right? Think about the structure and think about having kind of a course, like something, someone has gone through and able to help you maybe just like start 2 laps ahead of everyone else. That's what this looks like. But yes, so use the framework I just gave you, maybe write your post tomorrow. And so last exercise, right? Before I show you kind of the full system, I want to ask you something, and this one is easy, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you right now that you could write a trust building story post and publish it next week? So this one, I just want people to drop numbers in the chat. Scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that you can, based on the hook, the story, maybe like a transformation post or trust building story, how many of you can write and publish it next week? I got an 8. Okay. I love that. So that means this is working. A 10. Wow. A 5. Okay. 5 is good. 10. Wow. Okay. So I have people who are super confident, super excited, and then some that are maybe. And I kind of expected most people to be in the 4 to 7 range. So I'm loving the 8 and the 10s. But that tells me something really important, is that you understand the concept, right? You see why it works. And maybe as we've been talking, right, you've identified your own stories. But I think maybe for the people who are kind of in the 5 area, maybe you don't have a system yet. So you're like, okay, I think I have my story, but I'm not sure. And maybe you just don't have the templates, right? You're like, if I stare at a blank white screen on my, that LinkedIn square, what am I going to say, right? And maybe you don't have someone reviewing your work and giving you feedback. And maybe you just don't even have a community of people doing it alongside you, right? That's the gap between understanding storytelling and then doing the storytelling consistently. That's the difference. And that's exactly what I built. So I want to show that to you because I'm really excited. But, I want to take stock of where you are right now, or like where we are, right? So you understand the formula, you get how it works, you get it with real data, with real posts, you understand kind of what authentic storytelling is and how important it is and how AI cannot replace that. You've experienced that firsthand. And maybe for those who did some of the exercises, you wrote your own seed story, right? I got 2 seed stories in the comments, but this is the honest truth. Understanding the framework and having like a complete implementation system, they're 2 different things. And so truly over the last kind of 18 months, doing with a lot of trial and error, right? I took everything that I figured out, every template, every script, every framework, and I built it into a step-by-step system. And I want to show you what that looks like real quickly as we start wrapping up. So in the LinkedIn course, right? LinkedIn Unlocked course, this is what you're going to get. Module 1 is going to talk about, profile optimization, which is very important because that's the first thing people see. They're the first thing they see after they read that story post that you wrote, right? They're going to be like, okay, well, who is this person, right? And they're going to want to know you. So they're going to click on your name. And so I want to show you how to make that section, your profile, really a super duper trust engine. And then the second module is kind of this 5-story content system where you just want to understand how it works and then fill in the blank and write your own story. So again, like that white LinkedIn box that says post, You don't ever have to look at that and be like, I don't know what to do, right? And so the third module is about strategic outreach. So stories, again, that attract people, and that outreach converts them. So like how to get into people's DMs, how to start discovery call frameworks, how to have a calendar set up, like all of those things. We're going to talk about it in module 3. And then module 4 is going to be thought leadership. This is important, right? How to turn your LinkedIn visibility kind of into maybe speaking invitation, podcast, media opportunities. You want people to be reaching out to you and say, hey, I saw you. I'd like to invite you, come tell your story. And then it takes you from just someone who's on LinkedIn to really building a thought leadership platform. So that's very important. And that's in module 4. Module 5 is business building. So whether you're acquiring new clients, raising capital, building partnerships, starting a mentorship, building your brand, becoming a thought leader in your industry, right? All of that, you get it in module 5. And this is a system, it's probably my favorite, but it's what I used to build 153 million in assets under management in a real estate portfolio with over 120 investors. It was how I did it. And then the last module is going to be like social proof. So how to start building credibility that compounds your authority. So that's what that looks like. It's about 30 lessons. You get lifetime access, all future updates. And I'll say this, right? The modules aren't what makes it different. I think it's like a little bit more, and I'm going to talk about that real quickly. This is what makes it different, right? So it's not just videos and you being left alone. You're going to get 12 monthly live coaching calls with me for the first year, right? And so this is like working sessions. You're going to bring your actual posts, your actual profile, your actual challenges, and we're going to work through them, right? We're going to do it together. And you will get a private community of high income professionals building their visibility. And then you get direct access to me. So if you're stuck on something, right? Or if you need our team, you're not just going to get, just like I don't know what to do and take that to ChatGPT. If you need feedback from a post, you're going to reach out to me directly. So all of that, you're going to get it. So it's not just a course, but it's truly a complete system. And so before I show you what the investment is, I want to bring up one of our students who is in the course and loving it. I'm going to press playlist. Please let's make sure it works. And everyone here, let me know if you can hear me or hear it.
In Maryland, since joining this course, I have learned how to leverage my voice, my experience. I have learned how to share my story. I've learned how to be authentic and vulnerable, things that I could never do before. And this has really given me more confidence in my brand, has given me the leverage I needed to be able to really put myself out there.
Wonderful. And so this was a video from one of the students in the course, just saying kind of all the benefits that she's gotten from this. Okay, so this is the investment. So my team is going to put up a link right now. And for being at the webinar tonight, to being on this webinar tonight, right? The cost for the whole entire system is going to be $1,750. Now, this is just for tonight. And after tonight, that is going to go away. And then for the next 20 people who register for the course. So let's say you missed the webinar, you're listening to it tomorrow. It's going to be $1,997. And then after that, it's going to go to standard pricing for the next 30 people and then the final tier. So if I want to put it into perspective, right? This is a system that generated 153 million in assets for me, our entire team, our investors. It generated a United Nations speaking invitation, partnerships that are worth over $50,000 and more. And it's built truly a system of complete freedom. Now, the question I have for you is like, what is one of those outcomes worth to you? Like if maybe none of those things are important, but what is important that you could use LinkedIn to further your growth, your development, your business, your actual, what you do, your actual profession right now? What is one of them worth to you? And so if you use this to land maybe a client or speaking gig, and somebody talked about a gig that they lost, right? An investor conversation, then it kind of pays for itself immediately. But even more than that, I'm going to remove all the risk. Join it, implement it. If you're not satisfied with the value, I'll refund your investment. But I can say that so confidently because I know how amazing it has been for me and the growth that has come from it. So there's no hoops, no fine prints, just simple as that. Say, Cam, this didn't work out for me, and we will send you your money back. I'm that confident that this works. And every person who has committed to using it has seen really great results. So you take zero risk, right? So what's the point? And so you are at a fork in the road, and the link is available on the screen, right? There are two paths that you're going to go today, right? You leave today and you try to figure this thing out on your own. Maybe you'll post a few times and maybe you don't, right? And maybe you don't have the templates and the coaching and someone else to give you feedback. And in 3 months from now, you are going to be at the exact same place. But then maybe you enroll today, right? You start the system this week, or maybe tonight you get excited and you binge watch this thing, and you post, your first story using some of these frameworks within the next few days. And you get feedback on it, and you come into a community that's growing on LinkedIn, and it's using LinkedIn to further their purposes, right? And 3 months from now, you have a thriving LinkedIn presence with real conversations that are happening weekly. Go check out my LinkedIn and you'll see what I mean. But I was at that exact fork a little over 3 years ago, and I chose to invest in building visibility, in sharing my story. And that decision probably was one of the best decisions I made, because it got me here today, which is complete career freedom. And I love that, right? So again, the enrollment link is up on the screen. We're going to put it in the chat as well, but click on it, right? Choose what you want to do, and then start immediately. But for those who are listening tonight, right, who are on the webinar and are listening, right, you get an opportunity, and it's only for you. So I want to leave you with this before we open up for Q&A. And I think if you didn't get it, we're going to put the link back on the screen. But you're not just living your life, right? You're writing the story of it, right? And that means that you give to kind of your experiences, your challenges, your growth, your decisions. That becomes the narrative that shapes your future. So all of that, right? That's the meaning that you give to it, how you show up. So in many ways, right, we are both authors and the main characters of our lives, right? And so the stories that we tell, they don't just define us, right? They really connect us together. They connect us with one another. And so sometimes, right, the most powerful thing you can do is to share your story, to share the story behind the journey that you're on, this one beautiful thing called life that we're living. You get to share that, right? And you get to see people who come alongside this journey with you. And that's the most beautiful thing about this life. So don't be afraid to share your story. Don't be shy. And if you don't know what to post, right, if you leave here tonight, at least leave here learning that framework, how to write the hook, and then how to write the story, and thinking about the 5 story types that you can write. Take that. And if you watch the recording, screenshot it and go test that out and build a post and see what happens next week. But yes, that's all I got. I want to spend maybe the next 5-ish minutes. I saw some questions come in the chat. I want to spend the next maybe 5-10 minutes answering questions. So just ask me anything. Again, the enrollment link is up top. If you're ready, don't wait, grab your spot, but I'd love to answer some questions. So yes, and I'll say this, thank you for listening. And if you want to connect with me, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. So I'm going to open it up for questions. I'm going to, hold on. Sorry, let me end screen sharing. Okay. I saw a question in the chat. How does a novice navigate posting authentically? So, how does a novice navigate this so it's authentic and strategic rather than manipulative? Okay, this is a good question. So the question was, what approach do I use, and how does a novice really navigate this, posting on LinkedIn, telling your story so that's authentic and strategic rather than manipulative? And I would say to this, right, and this is a really good question. We can't pull it up right this second, but I think that you have to start telling your story, right? And I know we've talked about it, but I think that if you come from a place of authenticity and being genuinely honest, right? I think people will see that. The people who are manipulative, I think also people can see right through that. And I'll give you my story, right? In the beginning, when I started posting on LinkedIn, right, I didn't know what to post. And I said it, I think I said it in the call, but I would just like, I would go on, I'd go on Google, and I love personal development and mindset. And I was in that stage where I was learning, I was figuring out who I was and thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. So I did a lot of personal development. And when I didn't know what to post, right, I would go online and I would look up a Tony Robbins quote, or maybe like a Denzel quote or something that was inspirational, and I'd post it on LinkedIn, right? And that's how I started. Because I had a story, but I didn't know how to tell it, but I still wanted to encourage people. And so I did that. And slowly, as I learned more, right, I started learning, okay, it's okay to tell. I wanted people to walk this journey and to walk this life with me. And so I started posting, and I was like, okay, this is my first deal. I posted when I built Phoenix, or started building Phoenix. I talked about that. I talked about how hard it was, how I was balancing working full-time and building this business. So I just told stories, and I walked people along the process. And so people saw me from beginning and wanted to align with that story and to see where I'm going, right? So there was no manipulation, because when it was time for me to post my first deal, I put it on LinkedIn and I said, if you are interested, right? You've seen what I did. You've seen my stories. You've seen me do due diligence. If this interests you at all, right? Join me along this journey. Let's build wealth together. And so I think that people really are good judges of character. And so I think if you show up from the place of authenticity, you want to teach, you want to grow, you want to build something cool. I think if you share stories from that, I think it's going to be real. And I think there won't be any manipulation in that. So that's kind of like a long-winded answer to say, show up as your true self. You're going to make mistakes, share that, and let people see that. But the people who only show up to sell something, we see right through them. So thank you for that question. It was a deep question, especially in how we use social media, because at the end of the day, LinkedIn is a social media tool. I think that was the only question in the chat. I'm looking to see if I see anything else. Confident in method, not necessarily in the content yet. Okay, so it's going to take you. The method works. The content will come, especially if you join the course. So again, thank you so much for that question. I'm going to leave it open for one more second. If anybody has any additional questions, please feel free to toss it in the chat. But thank you so much for all the participation. I thoroughly enjoyed this webinar this evening. And again, the link is on the screen, so feel free to click on it. And if you have any questions, or if you're not sure, find me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, and I promise I'll respond to you. Okay. I think there are no other questions in the chat. Everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.